Hey there, Virgo rising. This is your ascendant forecast or rising sign forecast for the week ahead, starting from Monday, the 8th of December, taking you right the way through to Sunday, the 14th of December, 2025. Now, if last week's full moon in Gemini was enough to inspire you and illuminate you and help you really see what's going on between, your work and your life, your home life, then this is a week ahead where I think a lot of patterns are going to dissolve completely. The fog's going to clear. You're going to be feeling so much better. Why do I say that? I would say it's because we're coming to the end of a really old pattern that's been playing out. In particular, it's been playing out a lot over this last season. From the start of August, we've had this lovely grand water trine that's really at the end now. We've got the last Uranus opposition, that's to Mercury. On the same day, we've got Neptune going direct at the very, very last degree of the zodiac. And we've also got Mercury, your ruling planet, going into the sign of Sagittarius. So it's all change. There's some really big markers here. I really think that this week ahead, in particular on the day of the Uranus Mercury opposition, this is a time of revelation, later releasing, and then finally this sort of reorientation as, like I say, the fog lifts and moves. So let's have a look a little bit deeper and see how this takes place. If you're new to this channel, by the way, my name's Louisa, so welcome to Feel Good Astrology. As ever, I'm going to start by just giving a whole heap of thanks to the people that really support this channel on a weekly, monthly, or sometimes just ad hoc basis. I just really love all of your help and support, so thank you so very much. So anyway, these are the two charts I'm looking at. This is the first one, and as you can see, it starts right at the end of Cancer, in the early hours of Monday, the 8th of December. And then if I look at the second chart, you'll see the moon has moved right the way through to the end of Libra. So the moon is moving from Cancer right the way round to Libra. And it's going over some very sensitive parts of your chart. By the way, if you're looking at this chart and you are wondering, is my chart in whole sign or not? I'm using a whole sign model here. What that means is I'm allowing one sign per house. These are the houses. Each of these sections are the houses from 1 right the way through to the 12th house. Now, when you look at your birth chart, if you see the sign for Virgo and also the symbol for Libra in this first house, then it's also quite helpful to listen to the Libra forecast, because you've also got a Libra rising resonance going on there. So I'll leave that with you. Anyway, though, these are the two charts. You'll also see that during this week, Mercury starts off in the sign of Scorpio, and by the end of it, he is in the sign of Sagittarius, just like that. And you can see that I've also mentioned Neptune going direct. There is in the 7th house. So anyway, let's dig a bit deeper. So pretty quickly, the moon goes into the sign of Leo, and the first couple of days up until the 10th, you've got the moon in the 12th house. This is quite a private time. When the moon goes through the 12th house, we often feel quite tired, a little bit worn out. We just need to rest and recuperate a little bit. It's also a time when we're really intuitive, deeply psychic. We're really going into our own world. We need to be our own light. This isn't a time to seek advice from anyone else outside of ourselves. This is a time when journaling and possibly using AI actually is quite helpful, because it's like an ongoing conversation with yourself. This is a time to be very self-absorbed and kind of going into retreat. Now, during this time as well, we've got quite a tricky, I was going to say troubling then, but tricky came out, and I think tricky's better. We've got this square between Mars and Saturn, and Mars is down here in the 4th house. This is about the home, and Saturn is in the 7th house to do with your relationships. Now, Saturn is often a sign that represents parents, or you as an authority figure, or somebody as an authority figure in your life. It could show where your partner seems quite authoritative and possibly a bit bossy. Whereas Mars also can be quite bossy and an authority in their own right. But, Mars is independently in power, whereas Saturn is kind of cool, elderly, grasping of power. And so you might have a bit of a power struggle. One is really speaking of the heart, which is Mars. He's pumping up your body, whereas Saturn is appealing to the head and measurement and common sense and practicality. But what you might find is occurring on the 9th, which is Tuesday, is this sense of conflict between you and your partner, or someone at home and your partner. It just feels like things are slightly out of whack. My advice here, especially seeing as the moon is in the 12th house, is you probably just don't want to get involved. Your time and energy will be best spent relaxing, unwinding, and kind of winding it back in yourself. If you get involved in whatever's brewing, you might find yourself coming out of your rest and recuperation and not really being prepared. Mars in a square to Saturn is preparing you for a fight, and a challenge and a disruption. And actually, your energy is probably better spent for those 2 days between the 8th and the 10th in relaxing and observing what's going on, because it's that observation that gives you more space. And it gives you a bit of a chance to, resource yourself differently. We make different decisions, don't we, when we're not in the thick of things. And I absolutely recommend you don't find yourself in the thick of things then. If other people choose to, that's their lookout. But you've got that chance to just sit back a little bit. Now, as the moon goes into the sign of Virgo on the 10th, you'll be back in your body for sure. You'll be really feeling quite emotional. We often wear our emotions on our sleeve when the moon is in our first house. And so don't be surprised if you feel a bit more fired up. Now, these 2 days are huge. You'll see, look, I've got 3 entries for the 10th and also 3 entries of things happening on the 11th. So this is a very intense time. And, the moon going through this part of your chart is where you're completely identified in yourself. Like it's all about your identity. Everything that's going on is reminding you of stuff about your identity and the challenges that might be going on about your identity. And so it's interesting that your ruling planet is also in an opposition to Uranus. Now, this isn't the first time, but it is the last time that these 2 planets are in opposition this year. It happens every year. Usually it just happens once, but because Mercury went into this, went beyond it, then went retrograde, and Uranus went retrograde at the same time. These have gone into their opposition a few times. I think maybe 4 times even. At least 3, definitely 3. And 3. And I've spoken about this in a different video. But irrespective of the details, this is like Uranus up here is really challenging the way you see your world and the worldview. It's really beckoning that you're growing into a much bigger person with a much bigger appetite for life, with a sense of adventure and a sense of wanting a spiritual balance. Uranus up here is showing that there's an altered consciousness that's been arising actually for years. This isn't something new, but it feels very much like right now you've got another 6 months of recalibrating your unconscious mind and your consciousness. It's like you're really ready now to bring in this new feeling. And Mercury down here is really reminding you of the mindset and the behaviors that you were raised in. And there's conflict there. As you're embracing your new ideas, you might feel a little bit lonely. You might feel that it's taking you away or disconnecting you from how you were raised or the people that you've had support from in the past. So it's difficult rectifying that or finding balance there. And it does seem to be a bit of a challenge, and it seems to be dissolving things. I mean, maybe the people around you have been shifting too. That's entirely possible. I think we're in a co-creative universe. It's just my opinion. But, as you're shifting, everyone else is shifting around you, and you might just not feel that. It's worth checking. But on the same day, Neptune is also going direct. Now, Neptune has been going back into your 7th house, showing that maybe your relationships haven't been as clear or as concise as usual. In fact, I wouldn't say they're that concise because, with your 7th house in the sign of Pisces, that probably does bring up some kind of spiritual leeway and a little bit of a little like it's unboundaried, you could say. But Neptune going retrograde in there has probably made your relationships a lot more creative, a lot more intuitive, and a lot less boundaried and formal. But now that Neptune is going direct, I think you're going to come to experience your relationships in a whole new way. Maybe the way you've been relating to people is just absolutely evaporating right now. Maybe you don't have time for people to mess you around. Maybe it is time to say, look, I invest in my relationships, and if you want to invest in a relationship with me, here's how I need you to do it. To me, it feels like, the next place that Neptune's going to be going into would be 0 Aries, and that's going to be happening on the 26th of January next year. But it's not that long in terms of planetary movement. It's not that far away. You're moving forwards with a pace and a new sense of ideals about your relationships. And so I do think there is a clearing. And, maybe that's related to this as well. And then on the 11th, which is Thursday, we've got Venus working with the nodes, interestingly, reminding you that you're, again, learning more about relationships and learning to do them in a different way, that you don't want to be on your own. You've done that. You're very good at it, but you don't need to be. You're much more favoring what comes up from having a close relationship. And so, Venus in the 4th house is really showing you that love can really manifest. When you're feeling love at home and feeling a sense of safety, all of a sudden more safe people come in, more stable people come in, and they might not be the kind of stable people keeping you penned into your old mindset, but more stable, consciously aware people can be coming in. I really truly believe that. So hold the line of where you're going. Now, Mercury's also on the 11th in an exact trine to Neptune, I think, giving you the sense of intuition and compassion and forgiveness. And so even though you're feeling your relationships are changing, there's a sense of forgiveness and release, like a beautiful sense of sort of like universal release, a universal love. This is a sort of unconditional release, an unconditional human regard. I feel like there's a higher energy at work here, so that you feel really quite serene about your relationships. You recognize that they're evolving and you feel cool about it, not disturbed by it. And it can be quite worrying, can't it? If you get that sense that one or both of you are changing at the same time, it can be quite disorienting. And yet this actually feels quite good. It feels quite healthy and like it's the right time, like it's divine timing. And so then the last movement on the 11th in the sign of Virgo, with the moon in Virgo, we've also got Mercury heading into the sign of Sagittarius. And to me, it feels like you're coming home. Now, Mercury's not happy in the sign of Sagittarius, but coming into your 4th house, there is this feeling that much better conversations are coming home. I like this for you. And so that brings us to Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So we've got Friday the 12th, Saturday the 13th, and Sunday the 14th. And you'll see that the moon comes into Libra on the 12th. On the 13th, we've got Mercury in a sextile to Pluto, which I think is really helpful. I'm just going to move the charts on a little bit. So Mercury and Pluto in a lovely sextile. You're reminded of the power and the beauty that comes when you're having powerful conversations at home, how things transform. This is really insightful, penetrating energy. So it's a very strong day, is Saturday the 13th. And then Sunday the 14th is a day of two halves. Mars in a square to Neptune is quite difficult. We might all of a sudden have a feeling of, don't think I've got the strength for this. I don't think I've got the power for this. I feel a bit disillusioned. Maybe you've been sort of excited about your family potential, and then all of a sudden you're coming into the reality of what humans are like. And so it can feel a little bit disorienting and disenchanting. a little bit difficult. So you might feel like the wind has gone out of your sails. But my advice here is hold your path, hold your faith, don't give up. Some really great relationship stuff can come out of this. And then the last aspect of this week ahead that I think is of note is the sun coming into the trine with Chiron. Now, the sun here in Chiron is lovely. It's really encouraging you to just be really vulnerable, because vulnerability is the medicine. It's what's needed. You know, the sun is radiating. You're not hiding anything about yourself. You're feeling completely free to be yourself at home and to allow people to see you exactly as you are, not with any airs or graces, just exactly as you are. And I think you can do that. And from that comes some real healing. I think this whole week is helping you to see very clearly. So the truth of your relationships comes out, and the sort of fantasy of it, the will we won't be, did I get that right? Will we, won't we? There we go. The kind of waviness of things where you're just not very sure about things, that's going to move off. You're coming into a greater sense of clarity. So I hope that's helpful for you. And if you find the way I look at relationships helpful or healing or motivating or illuminating, and you want to work with me some more, then consider joining my membership on School. I've got Monday to Friday forecasts. I have love forecasts and career forecasts every week for all 12 signs. I have a classroom where I have hangouts with people. And from January, we're going to have actual official classes where you can rock up with your chart and dive into different lessons and learning together. And, you know, if you actually want to work closely with me and explore your chart whilst also learning about astrology, I've got an astrology mentorship program right now where you and I can work together every month for an hour or 90 minutes and explore your chart and learn about astrology as a living astrological movement. So yeah, if any of this appeals, then just get in touch. Just invite me to work with you. All of my details are below in the video notes or on the channel page. So yeah, maybe get in touch. But whatever happens, have a beautiful week ahead, and hopefully I'll catch up with you all soon. Lots of love. Bye for now.